welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 52. This is the Week 2 preview episode. I'm going to call this one Less Talking, More Tackling. That's really what this week is all about. We got off to a rough start last week at home with a 16-10 loss to the New England Patriots. But it's only one game, 16 more left to play, which sounds like a lot, but, you need to start winning them. But, hey, one game at a time. It's not going to be an easy game at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs got off to a good start with a win over the Baltimore Ravens last Thursday night. They're coming in looking to get back on the winning track against the Bengals. Bengals were pretty competitive. We're going to get into some comments from some of the players this week, but the Bengals at least feel like they're still a team to be reckoned with, one of the top teams in the AFC. In this episode, we're going to just do a quick rundown of some of the big highlights that we heard about the Bengals this week, some injuries, some key matchups to watch in this game. And then late Saturday night, there was a big news story that dropped from ESPN. We're going to cover that as well. But after that Patriots loss, there was a lot of people not knowing what to think, really. The expectations had not been met. Obviously, the Bengals had been favored by 8.5 points going into that game, and that was down to 7.5 points when T. Higgins was out with a hamstring injury right before the game or right before the weekend. But a lot of people were looking for someone or something to blame. It was the blame game. As soon as they lost the game, knives come out. Everything was all roses and optimism when everybody in the league was 0-0 record. But as soon as the Bengals went in and lost one game, the tone in the locker room and the tone of the players and coaches dramatically changed. Before the game started, understandably, Zac Taylor was projecting a lot of optimism about the team, saying, this team is prepared. We're so prepared. This has been a great training camp. We're just ready to go in there and play another team. And, they say that every year. Of course, they can't go into the season and be like, I don't know. These guys, they're okay, I guess. But from my own perspective, when I was listening to the reviews from the Bengals radio announcers, I listen every year to Dan Horton, Dave Lapham, and they give their accounts of the Bengals training camps. And they'll say, this player was looking great. This player made a big play, whatever. And this year, I felt like there were some positive reviews coming out of training camp, but I didn't hear glowing reviews about how amazing the offense looked or how they were, scoring touchdowns all over the Bengals defense in practice or anything like that. And I felt like if Joe Burrow had been looking super like Superman in training camp, they would have gone out of their way to praise him and say stuff like that. They gave okay reviews. They were like, it was more just like a confirmation of, yes, Joe Burrow still looks like Joe Burrow. They didn't say, he looked amazing. They were just like, yeah, it's still the same guy, totally the same guy. And so after last week's game where we came out and we saw a Joe Burrow, it wasn't necessarily the best Joe Burrow we'd ever seen in a game. And a lot of people were asking, why is that? Because they were saying, is it the wrist? And trying to get into, he was flexing his wrist on the sidelines and maybe the wrist was bothering him. Well, like I said, he had surgery, so it's not like that's going to make his wrist feel better and make him better at football. So it didn't help, certainly. And he said that is going to be something he's going to have to deal with throughout the season. That shouldn't be a surprise. That's just something maybe fans are going to have to adjust to. And I don't know, the other thing with everybody was pointing at, Ja'Marr Chase's contract situation leading up to this was a big distraction for everybody, and nobody could focus because Ja'Marr. And then they were saying, well, Ja'Marr Chase only caught 6 passes for 60 yards and no touchdowns. Well, obviously he didn't play well because he didn't, because he didn't have 3 touchdowns in the game and score a bunch of points for their fantasy football team, that he must not have played a good game. Well, if you actually watch the game, you can see that Ja'Marr Chase was wide open on a number of routes that he ran, but Joe Burrow just didn't throw him the ball most of the time. Ja'Marr Chase can't throw the ball to himself, just like, he can't block. When he was in the Super Bowl, when the Bengals were playing in the Super Bowl, last play of the game, Ja'Marr Chase beat Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey fell down. He was wide open. He could have walked in for a touchdown if Joe Burrow would have thrown the ball to him. But Joe Burrow got sacked because, Aaron Donald was coming up the middle, sacked Joe Burrow before he had a chance to even do anything. So you can't say, Ja'Marr Chase didn't play well because his stats weren't good. Well, stats don't tell the full story of what happened in the game. A lot of it had to do, wasn't in his control. You could obviously say that if Ja'Marr Chase had been there all training camp, he would have maybe had some better timing and chemistry with the other players that were out there. But he was out there. He played pretty much the entire second half. Bengals, for whatever reason, didn't find a way to get him the ball. I've said in previous episodes that I thought if Ja'Marr Chase didn't touch the ball at least 10 times, basically it was coaching malpractice and the coaches aren't doing their jobs. And I still felt like that. The fact that Ja'Marr Chase only touched the ball 6 times in the game against the Patriots, I don't care if he did miss all of training camp, still got to give him the ball at least 10 times because he's obviously the Bengals' best player, especially with Joe Burrow coming back from the wrist injury, T. Higgins out of the game with a hamstring. Ja'Marr Chase was by far the best player that the Bengals had on the field, and so the fact that he only touched the ball 6 times, that's not a recipe for a winning football game. So the Bengals are going to have to figure out a plan coming into this week against the Chiefs. I expect they'll at least be more competitive than they were against the Patriots because they've at least adapted and gotten used to the fact that T. Higgins won't be in the lineup. And maybe, they were game planning a lot to have T. Higgins. They anticipated him being able to play. All of a sudden he was out. That threw a wrench in their whole game plan in everybody. So I think just having that extra week to adjust will help them at least not look like they're just sleepwalking. It looked like the Bengals, the first half of the game against the Patriots, they just were going through the motions. And the Patriots came out ready to play. Like, they were putting some hits on the Bengals players, and I didn't see the same kind of violence and hitting from the Bengals coming back the other direction. But hopefully the Bengals are able to ramp it up and figure out how to actually play some football in week 2. A lot of people wanted to blame a lack of preseason playing time for the Bengals starters. They say, the Bengals starters only played like one series in the preseason. That's why coming out of game 1, they weren't ready to go. And some of the other teams played their starting lineup for multiple games, multiple series to get experience. And, there's trade-offs for both. Obviously, if you play more, you're at greater risk for injury in the preseason as well. So the Bengals, I think they're willing to accept the risk of not playing that well early in the season if that means having their team and their players healthier longer into the games that actually matter. It doesn't feel good when you're going out there and losing the first game, but thinking in the long term, we said the main objective is to keep Joe Burrow healthy for all 17 games. So even though he didn't look very comfortable and didn't play very well last week, he did get through mostly uninjured. So at least, like Joe Burrow said in his press conference, criticizing him and saying that he played bad is a lot better than a Joe Burrow being injured, not even playing at all. So I'd still much rather watch this version of Joe Burrow than Jake Browning. And I'd still rather be watching Joe Burrow lose than not watching Joe Burrow at all. So that's like the silver lining was at least we'll get to see more of Joe Burrow. And we see, like Tua Tagovailoa for the Dolphins, on Thursday night, he just got another concussion. He's going to be out for an undetermined amount of time. So you never know when it could be your last snap in the NFL or when you could be out for a significant amount of time. So we just have to, take solace in the fact that Joe Burrow is still, healthy at this point in the season. But turning a little bit to this game coming up against the Chiefs, I try to, learn a little bit of something about the opponent, maybe do a deep dive on their media, but I can't stand the Chiefs at all. I don't want to know anything about the Chiefs. The less Chiefs information that I have to absorb, the better. So I have abstained from all Chiefs media. I don't know much. I don't like the Chiefs. And the Bengals players feel the same way because in the locker room, they're giving interviews, talking a little bit of trash. So Jamar Chase was saying, that the Bengals are still the team to beat in the AFC. They got to play like it. They got to act like it. And he was saying that since he went off for 266 yards as a rookie, the Chiefs have been double covering him, having, safeties over the top, maybe even sometimes triple covering him. So this year they were talking about moving him around outside, inside, lining up in different positions to try to get different matchups for Jamar Chase. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch if the Bengals, now that Jamar Chase is supposed to be in practice more, if he is able to be more involved in the offense, be moving around. We'll see what they're able to do, what Zac Taylor and the Bengals offensive coaching staff, Dan Pitcher, Justin Riscotti, all these guys, all these coaches that they're, working together, they better come up with some kind of a game plan to attack the Chiefs. Coach Spags, Steve Spagnuolo, and Chris Jones. That's the thing that's kind of a little bit scary was one of the things people wanted to blame last week was the offensive line because Joe Burrow got sacked 3 times. Oh, the offensive line didn't play well. And there were a few snaps where, Trent Brown, their free agent right tackle, who's 6'8", 380 pounds, but he was getting thrown around on a few plays by a much smaller guy, getting beat. He gave up about 2.5 of those sacks on the stat sheet. And they asked Trent Brown, he said in one of the interviews this week, he said that was the worst game that he's ever played in his NFL career. And this is his 10th season in the NFL. So he's played in a lot of games. For him to say that was his worst game, on the one hand, you hope that that's true, that he doesn't play any games worse than that. Hopefully that's the bottom of the barrel as far as he gets. But on the other hand, if this is his 10th season in the league, he's probably not going to get a whole lot better going forward. So it's a little bit concerning that he would say that and make that an evaluation. Hopefully he'll get better. But we did see, on a bright note, his backup for right now, Amarius Mims, the first-round pick at offensive tackle. He's been working his way back into practice. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to play. But just the fact that he's been able to get out there on the practice field and go through some of the motions with the team, mentally he can stay involved. So when he is physically ready to come back, he'll be ready to come back because I think they're going to need him sooner rather than later if Trent Brown keeps playing like that. Now, one of the other Bengals players that gave an interesting interview was Cam Taylor-Britt, cornerback, number 29. He's probably their top coverage cornerback. And some of the reporters asked him what he thought about the Chiefs rookie, Xavier Worthy from Texas. Xavier Worthy broke former Bengal John Ross's record for the 40-yard dash time at the NFL Combine this past draft in Indianapolis. He ran a 4.21 40-yard dash. He's not the biggest guy, but he's, obviously very fast, very quick, but people say he's not just a speed guy. He's a football player who's fast, not just a fast guy who plays football. And in his first game, he scored I think he was the first player in NFL history, or one of the first players in like the last 50 years or a Super Bowl era to have a 20-yard touchdown run and a 20-yard touchdown catch in his first game in the NFL. So that was an impressive showing. He took an end around, had a wall of blockers out in front of him, pretty much just could have walked in the end zone, but he did it very quickly because he's a fast guy. But Cam Taylor-Britt, he said he wasn't very impressed with Xavier Worthy. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he said that he's just a fast guy. he just runs in straight lines fast, but that's about it. And he said he only weighs 100-something pounds. If we get our hands on him, he won't be able to do anything. So we'll just get our hands on him, and that'll be that. So obviously this was going around making headlines. People were saying, why is Cam Taylor-Britt making bulletin board quotes and material to get the Chiefs even more riled up to look, give them any more motivation to want to beat the Bengals than they already have. And who knows, but that'll be, I'm sure, one of the storylines if Cam Taylor-Britt is ended up in some kind of pass coverage against Xavier Worthy. I'm sure the announcers will be like, either way, either he was right or he wasn't right. So we'll have to see. That'll be something to watch. I don't have a huge problem with talking, but you got to back it up. Like, you can't talk and then go out there and give up 3 touchdowns. So it's entertainment. It's like being honest or giving answers to the media. Hopefully, he's not trying to stir anything up, but we'll see. But as far as injuries go, the biggest thing that popped up that was new was Tanner Hudson, tight end for the Bengals. He had a knee injury and he was limited in practice, then didn't practice a couple times. He's doubtful for the game. T. Higgins did not practice at all this week. He's doubtful again. Chris Jenkins is out again. He's coming off of that thumb surgery. He's the rookie 2nd-round pick. They could use him against the Chiefs, but he's still out. Speaking of people that they could use, Myles Murphy, their 1st-round pick from last year, he's still on injured reserve. And Sam Hubbard, he has not looked good. And I know we all love Sam Hubbard. He's been a great pillar of the Cincinnati community, Cincinnati local guy, done a lot of great things in his career, but at least in week 1, he was just not very effective. In the run game, he was missing tackles. That was one of the things that he was always really good at, was being a run defender and not so much of a pass rusher, but he wasn't really doing much of either one. He was looking slow, not very effective, and that's where we could use a guy like Myles Murphy to come in and take some of those snaps for Sam Hubbard, but unfortunately he's injured. So Bengals defensive end depth is really lacking right now. They got Joseph Osai, who can come in for Trey Hendrickson, and then I think they got Cedric Johnson is the first one off the bench, who's a rookie, 6th-round pick. So it's not looking amazing on the Bengals defensive line. We're going to have to see if they can hold up a little bit better against this Chiefs interior offensive line, which is one of the best in the league. Creed Humphrey, Joe Thuney, some other guy, I don't know, but those are the 2 I know. But the Chiefs offensive line is pretty big, pretty physical. Hopefully the Bengals defensive line is able to match their physicality. There's a couple other guys who were. Geno Stone, the safety, was on the injury report, limited with a back, but he doesn't have any kind of designation going into the game, so he should be fine. But these are just the kind of things, these little things add up throughout the course of the season. Little injuries here and there where a player will still be able to play in the game, but they won't be quite 100%, and they never will be really after week 1, especially. A little knee here. Zach Moss was listed with a little neck injury. So basically, all these guys are going to have something. It's going to accumulate throughout the course of the season. And Logan Wilson was limited and didn't practice for one of the days because he had a knee injury, so we'll have to watch. Logan Wilson was the leading tackler for the Bengals with 13 tackles last week. Hopefully he is not slowed down at all by that, but that's just something to watch. The Chiefs are mostly healthy. Marquise Hollywood-Brown has been placed on injured reserve, so he's been out since preseason, where he had a sternoclavicular joint sprain, which can be pretty dangerous, pretty painful, definitely. That's one that John Ross coincidentally also had when he was playing for the Bengals. He's going to be out. Otherwise, the Chiefs are pretty healthy, and not only are they healthy, but they're going to be well rested because Chiefs played last Thursday or 2 Thursdays ago, first game of the season. Bengals played on Sunday, meaning the Chiefs have 3 extra days of rest and 3 extra days to prepare. And you could say the advantage is the Bengals have 3 extra days to watch the Chiefs film, but I don't think they were getting ready for it. I hope the Bengals weren't watching the Chiefs film before they were preparing for the Patriots. Maybe that's the reason why they lost to the Patriots, if they started getting ready for the Chiefs, looking ahead and overlooked the Patriots. But you never know. As far as matchups to watch in this game, I'm going to be watching Trey Hendrickson going up against the Chiefs' rookie left tackle, Kingsley Suamataia. Oh, he's not like super. I thought he was like 6'8", 350, but no, he's 6'4", 325. So he's going to be a rookie going up against Trey Hendrickson. I'm assuming Trey Hendrickson is going to get some pressure on Patrick Mahomes, but it's going to be the question of, can anybody else get any pressure on Patrick Mahomes? Because it can't just be Trey Hendrickson all the time. And even if it is Trey Hendrickson, can he get Patrick Mahomes down on the ground and actually sack him? Because that was one of the things that stood out was when I watched the Chiefs-Ravens game last week, both of the quarterbacks, Mahomes and Lamar Jackson for the Ravens, were escaping sacks like, Houdini breaking out of a straitjacket or something. Like every time it looked like the defenders had both of those quarterbacks in their grasp, just like fingertips away, they somehow escaped and got out and made a play with their feet or scrambled around and threw it downfield. But I was just amazed at how both of those quarterbacks were so skilled at moving in the pocket, avoiding sacks, and then contrasting that with watching Joe Burrow taking sacks that even Joe Burrow wouldn't normally take, much less Lamar Jackson. Like all 3 of the sacks that Joe Burrow took against the Patriots, Lamar Jackson would have never taken those sacks. He would have gotten away from those, and probably Patrick Mahomes as well. So this is going to be hopefully a better game for Joe Burrow in terms of avoiding the sacks from the Chiefs. And speaking of that, Chiefs are going to have much better players on their defensive line than the Patriots had, who were able to sack Joe Burrow 3 times last week. Chris Jones, it's not really so much of a matchup I can specifically call out for. It's just going to be the Bengals offensive line as a whole against Chris Jones, because Chris Jones, he can move around and play at any position, and they really try to find the best matchup for him. So they pretty much just find the weakest link and go against that. That might be Trent Brown on the outside. Chris Jones usually plays more interior, but he can play outside on like third down passing downs. He's a good exterior rusher as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how he matches up, which player on the Bengals offensive line he wants to try to go against, and how the Bengals are able to respond to that. We already mentioned Taylor-Britt was saying Xavier Worthy isn't anything special as a receiver, so that's going to be a matchup that we're going to watch and the television announcers are going to watch. It's going to be on CBS. This is the late afternoon 4:25 game with Jim Nantz and Tony Romo. So I'm sure Tony Romo is going to be going on and on and on about Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow, to be fair, but it's probably going to be mostly Patrick Mahomes if they get into the lead. I don't know if I mentioned Chiefs are 6-point favorites going into this game. Bengals are 6-point underdogs, obviously. And I don't have a great feeling about this one. It's, just based on last week, I'm not brimming with confidence. I just want the game to be close going into the fourth quarter. Like, obviously it's going to be close to begin the game, but I hope, it's not like 30-0 by halftime. If it was 30-0 Bengals, then that'd be okay. But I hope it's not like 30-0 Chiefs and, the Bengals are trying to get a point up on the board like halfway through the fourth quarter. We've seen some of those games with Zac Taylor where I think it was the Ravens game with Wink Martindale as the defensive coordinator where they were losing like 30-0, and then at the end of the game, 3 minutes left to go, Zac Taylor kicks a field goal just to get some points on the board. I hope it's not one of those games, but that's another just matchup to watch is the coaching battle, Andy Reid versus Zac Taylor as head coach, but more so Andy Reid versus defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, because Andy Reid's also the Chiefs' offensive play caller and offensive coordinator. And then Zac Taylor, Bengals head coach and offensive play caller against Chiefs defense and their defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo. So those mind games is going to be interesting to see because they do know each other. They've played the Chiefs and Bengals have played each other in the playoffs and multiple times in the regular season with the same coaching staff. That's one of the things that's unique about both of these teams is they haven't had a whole lot of turnover in their coaching staff in terms of head coaches and assistants. Bengals did lose Brian Callahan to the Tennessee Titans, so it's going to be interesting to see how the Bengals' game plan changes week to week, game to game without Brian Callahan. Obviously, Dan Pitcher, he's skilled coach in his own right with Zac Taylor, but how quickly do the Bengals adapt to it? Because obviously, whatever they did last week, they thought it was going to work and it didn't. So now you go back to the drawing board, make corrections, figure out, okay, well, what's the game plan? And you can't just say, we do what we do and it's going to work as long as we do it right. At a certain point, if it doesn't work, you got to change it up. So I'm not going to, don't toss everything out after one game, but hopefully whatever corrections from the first game need to be made, get made going into this game against the Chiefs. Because if they don't, like watching that game against the Chiefs, even before the Bengals came out and looked like garbage against the Patriots on Sunday, even before that, when I was just watching the game, I was thinking to myself, damn, like, if this Chiefs team that I'm watching right now played the Bengals from last season, they beat the shit out of the Bengals from last season. And I was like, I don't know if the Bengals are that much better than they were at the end of last season. So even before I saw them come out last week and play that game, I didn't think that the Bengals would be able to keep up with this Chiefs team from this year. Because I think the Chiefs, even though they won the last two Super Bowls, they might look even better than they did last year. Because if you remember last year, they came out, kind of got to a slow start. We were wondering what was up with the Chiefs. Are they as good? And then they got hot at the end and won a bunch of games and obviously won the Super Bowl. So it's not how you start, it's how you finish. But can't get off to too slow of a start. But it's, this is only one game out of 17. So even if they lose this game, it's not that big of a deal. They're going to have two super easy opponents in the Washington Commanders and the Carolina Panthers coming up in weeks 3 and 4. So it's not the end of the world to lose this game, but it would be really amazing to win this game or at least have an entertaining, enjoyable game to watch where the Bengals score, sooner than 45 minutes into the game. But the other question is, how are the Chiefs going to try to defend against Ja'Marr Chase? L'Jarius Sneed was the Chiefs' top cornerback last season, and he was getting into some trash talk with Ja'Marr Chase leading up to the game. Chase was saying he wasn't that good. Kind of a similar thing with Taylor-Britt. So neither one of these teams likes each other. Sneed is gone. He went to Tennessee. He's playing opposite Chidobe Awuzie on the Titans. So now it's going to be interesting to see how the Chiefs defensive backs match up against Ja'Marr Chase. Like the Patriots had Christian Gonzalez last week. Do the Chiefs put Trent McDuffie on Chase and shadow him around, or they do something different? And I'm flipping back and forth here, but on the opposite side, how does Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy and Isaiah Pacheco and all the skill positions that the Chiefs had in Noah Gray, the other tight end, how do all those weapons for the Chiefs, how can the Bengals stop them, basically? Because, Von Bell, Geno Stone, they're not the fastest safeties in the NFL for sure. So they're going to have to watch out. It could be, if the Chiefs decide to go deep, it's going to be hard for the Bengals defensive backs to keep up with them. Taylor-Britt and Dax Hill on the outside should have good enough speed, but I don't think anybody can stay with Xavier Worthy in his 4-2-1. But on a positive note, Chiefs do have Juju Smith-Schuster, who Bengals fans will remember when he played with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big hit. I think it was that Christmas game where Ryan Finley somehow won a game in the NFL at quarterback. So hopefully there's another repeat of that. If Juju comes over the middle, Von Bell can blow him up, get a turnover. That's the thing that the Bengals could have used last week against the Patriots, was a defensive turnover. Bengals lost a turnover. They had two fumbles that they gave away by Tanner Hudson and Charlie Jones. defense didn't create any turnovers, and that could have really helped swing the tide. So if the Bengals are able to create a turnover, that would definitely help them stay in this game against the Chiefs, because I don't know if they're going to be able to keep up with the Chiefs' offense at this rate. But last thing to cover before we get out of here is right before the day of the game, basically, there was a news story out on ESPN from Adam Schefter, and according to, insider sources and all this stuff, there's more and more stuff bubbling out from this Ja'Marr Chase contract situation. It's not like it was just going to go away and disappear because the Bengals started playing games. Like the Bengals seem to have a team policy of no in-season negotiations of contracts. It's not that they can't do it. They just have some kind of policy of, we don't want to negotiate. We're just going to focus on football games during the football season. That's just I think an excuse to not sign any contracts during the season. But Ja'Marr Chase obviously is not feeling happy about not getting paid when he's looking around, and pretty much every other team that had players who wanted a new contract, they got it done. I mean, the only one I can even think of was the Jets, where Hassan Reddick says $15 or $16 million a year isn't enough, and he wants more than that. But otherwise, the Cowboys, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, the Dolphins, the 49ers, all these other teams with big star players who were looking for new contracts, they managed to get it done, except for the Bengals. And, you wonder why. Why is it like this? Where there were reports that the Bengals, they made an offer where the number, technically it was the same as the rest of the market, but the way that it was structured and the timing of when certain amounts of money were going to be guaranteed were different than how other contracts were structured for other players. So Ja'Marr didn't accept that deal. Then there was a story that came out that said Ja'Marr feels like he was misled by the team because they said they were going to get a contract extension worked out at the end of last season and coming into training camp, and then now they're still in a situation where they haven't gotten anything done. So obviously he's a little bit frustrated and getting impatient with that. But because of that, Ja'Marr has apparently taken out an insurance policy on himself and his body. And you see this a lot of times with athletes, if they're, possibly about to get a big contract, a big payday, like if they're about to, go into the NFL draft or something like that, you'll see college players take out insurance policies on themselves. Ja'Marr Chase is doing the same thing. He's got a $50 million insurance policy on himself for, I don't know how long it's extending into, but at least this season, for any injury or loss of earning potential, where, obviously if something happened, since he doesn't have that contract extension, he doesn't have that security, this will at least mitigate some of that risk. And that's good, that's responsible, that's smart for Ja'Marr Chase to, obviously he's got good agents, good financial advisors saying, hey, we can't take this risk, so risk management, let's get an insurance policy. That's good, but you don't want to have to cash in on that policy. Obviously, you would rather not have to use that. You'd rather pay for your homeowner's insurance and have your house burned down. So it's a smart decision, but I'm sure that Ja'Marr Chase would rather get a contract extension and not need this insurance policy. If you've already got $150 million in the bank, you don't need an insurance policy for risk of injury. The insurance policy is the $150 million. So, I can see it both ways, because obviously I don't like spending money either. So I don't blame the Bengals for not wanting to spend a bunch of money on a player if they don't absolutely have to. But it's not going to do a lot beneficial in terms of the team morale, the team wanting to play hard for the owner. Because that's one of the things that was interesting. I'm getting off the track here, but one of the things that was interesting, I was listening to the Bengals UK podcast after the game, and one of the guys expressed, this is his own personal opinion, but it seemed like they were saying in the UK, they were more for the team instead of the players. And he was like, it comes down to whether you're Team Jamar or Team Bengals. And I'm on Team Bengals. I support the team. Nobody's bigger than the team. And Jamar should just honor his contract, whatever. I don't know if that's like a cultural thing where people in the UK are like more for the team or whatever. But, it's kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth, that kind of an argument, because nobody would say that about Joe Burrow. They say the complete opposite. They say Joe Burrow is the team. As the team goes and as Joe Burrow goes, so do the Bengals. So nobody was saying Joe Burrow's not bigger than the team. That's, hypocritical to say, nobody's bigger than the team. But also, what does that really mean? Because there's actually, a team is a collection of individuals. And so if you're saying, I'm on Team Bengals, well, does that mean you're on the side of the ultimate owner of the Bengals, aka Mike Brown, the president of the Bengals? Because, the team is made up of a bunch of individual players, and they all have their own needs and contract negotiations. So like Trey Hendrickson was another guy who wanted a new contract from the Bengals. So I'm sure this guy would say, I'm on Team Bengals, not on Team Trey Hendrickson. So if you keep saying that about every player, you say, I'm not on the player side, I'm not on this individual player side. Well, what is the team then if it's not a collection of all these individual players? So in my mind, you can't separate out the team from the individual. They're one and the same. And to me, I am supporting the team because I am supporting one of the players on the team, Jamar Chase. So it's not a distinction. It's unfortunate, and I think that's kind of a trick that the teams play on the fans. And this is where you get into what's, referred to as fans rooting for the laundry. They don't really care who's out there wearing the stripes, wearing the orange and black. It doesn't matter. Whatever number it is, as long as, they're part, the fans want to feel like they're part of the team. They're part of this larger group of, whatever. So they get in their mind that anybody who is not with them is against them. So if the player wants something that might impact the team, negatively, or feel like it would go against the team's overall best interest, all of a sudden some of these fans turn against the player. And in a similar way, you see like if a national media person says something that's critical of the Bengals organization or the players on the Bengals, people come out of the woodworks to defend him. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. This guy's an idiot. He should be fired, blah, blah, blah. It's like these people, why are they so defensive? They're not a part of the organization. They're not getting personally attacked. But I try to take a more logical, reasonable approach to things. I know that's not the same way a lot of people on social media take things, but that's why I don't go on social media, and neither should you. But anyway, that's about enough for this episode. Not much more to talk about. I did enough talking. Just get ready to watch this game. It's going to be fun to have this game in that late window because there'll be more viewers, obviously. This is like the prime time, one of the biggest viewing audiences of the week. And, Chiefs, Bengals, a rematch of a couple AFC championships. It should be an exciting matchup. A lot of people tuning in. And then you get to watch Red Zone, all the games going on before that, and then focus on the Bengals game in the afternoon. So that'll be good viewing experience. We'll come back after the game, recap it. Hopefully it's recapping a Bengals victory. That would be quite impressive if they were able to pull it off, but I'm not holding out hope too much. But until next time, I'm going to leave you with a hooday and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.